Record. Okay, so we have a couple questions. So for Spencer's question, will we be giving conversion factors and formulas like power and potential energy? If you need to use it, it'll be provided. I don't think we'll have like I don't think there's conversions on the exam. If there are, we'll just give either the conversions on like a separate conversion sheet, or most of the time we sort of embed it into the question when we have things like formulas and stuff. So I know in the past we had a question that was similar to that spring question that we gave you guys for the last MA, and and it was really just a question that had an equation associated with it. And so I know for that question we had the equations just sort of on there, listing what you guys needed. Anyways, I'm hoping that, is it Hussein's question got answered? I guess I'm not quite sure what that's asking. But if yes, good. If not, let us know a little bit more so we can figure that out. All right, so let's go to Tessa's question. I'm going to open up OneNote really quick here, and we can get working. Make sure that, okay, I don't have any emails up or student grades. That's good. Okay, and let me share my desktop. Okay, and let me do this. Switch to this one, add a page, good to go. All right, and then last but not least, I will take the tablet into my own hands so that we can actually get some good stuff out of this. Okay. Move my phone out of the way. Awesome. Okay. So let me pull up the question that we had. So let me go to the chat. So the question we have is, we have D is equal to, this is just predefined, and I'm assuming, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Tessa. Let's see, 3, -2. And so what we have D defined, and a goal is to find what is stored in X. At least that's the assumption I'm working under. And so X is the max of 3 times, right? 3 times ones. So we know ones is a function. 1s, 2, and then comma D, and then all of this is in brackets, and then we close our parentheses. So what does this actually mean? What is this going to output is our goal. So this is actually almost a perfect example of sort of how I go through and work through a problem, because there's a lot to sort of decompose here, right? So whenever you have a big outer function, so in this case it's max, it's always best to start with figuring out what it's actually taking the max of. So we know that, and I can switch colors here, it's taking the max of what's in between these red brackets, right? So first we need to figure out what that is. So we have 2 elements of that. We have the 3 times 1s, 2, 2. And then the other thing we have is D, and we know D. D is easy. I'm just going to draw an arrow here and say, well, an arrow, and say, okay, we know what D is. That's easy enough to do. But the 3 times 1s, 2 isn't so simple. So this is a question that you might see on the written portion of your exam. So I'm actually not going to look at the MATLAB documentation, but since I've been using my matrix functions and I know how they work, I know that ones is going to produce a matrix that's full of ones that has this number of rows and this number of columns. So this is our R, this is our C. So the result of this portion of it, just the ones, is a 2x2 matrix like this. Now, we have to do 3 times this, right? And so we know that we can also do scalar multiplication across. So what I mean by that is we can do 3 times this one, 3 times this one, 3 times this one. The fact that the inner dimensions of a scalar don't match up with a matrix doesn't matter. So we don't care if it's a 1 by 1, that doesn't affect us in terms of using this versus dot times. So the result of this, right, is going to be 3, 3, 3, 3. And then we know that D over here is 4, -1, 3, -2. Now, how are these combined? So they're combined with a comma, right? And so what I think we should do is I think we should go both directions with this. So let's first do the comma version, and then we're going to replace this comma with a semicolon and do the problem again and see what we get. So how this combines ends up looking like this with 3, 3, 4, -1, and 3, 3, 3, -2. And so if you just plug these two matrices in within another set of brackets and a comma in between, this is going to be your result. So using that, we now know that what we're doing is we're taking the max of that. So on an exam, the last thing I want to see is somebody writing that the answer to this question is 4. This is not correct, right? 4 is the overall max, but we only have one max here, right? So that means that we need to be taking the max along a dimension, right? And so for max, we know that, and this is the same for sum, this is the same for things like min and mean as well, but we know that it takes the max along each column. So we're looking for the max along each column, and then our output's going to be a row vector. So the end result here is that x is equal to 3, 3, 4, -1. And I don't know if that was written on your exam or quiz when you got it back, Tessa, but I believe that is the answer. If I'm wrong there, you can certainly correct me. But awesome. Okay. So if I agree with MATLAB, I'm in good shape. So quickly, so the answer before, yeah, so that's a good question. So Tessa asked if there was a second max function here, right, that encompassed all of this, would the answer be 4? And the answer is yes. And so briefly, if we want to look at if this were a semicolon here, and so I'll do this in green, we know that this part is the same, this part is the same. The only thing that's different is that we're stacking them one on top of the other. And so if we stack them one on top of the other, our inner matrix that we're taking the max of would look like this, where we have 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, -1, 3, -2. And so the max of this would lead to an x of, let's see, 4 and 3. So hopefully that makes sense. This is the case where this is a semicolon, not a comma. And so that's what's important to look at. So important takeaways here are, how does MATLAB look at semicolons versus commas? What matrix dimensions need to agree? How do functions like ones, zeros, things like that work? And really important, and this is something that a lot of students miss on this first exam, is how does max work? So I would really suggest you look at the max documentation. It's a little funny. For example, if we wanted to take the max along each row, then our command would look like this, and I'll write this in yet another color. But if we wanted to take the max of some variable a along the rows, I would actually have to put empty brackets before my 2. And so there's a reason for that. If you read the MATLAB documentation far enough, there is a reason. I don't know if it's a good reason, but there is a reason. And so you just have to put in the empty set here with max. Now, obviously, that is going to be different from functions like sum. So if I were taking the sum of a along the second dimension, which is our rows, I would do this. So know this difference. This difference is going to be important. I would think that this would be one of the more challenging questions on the exam, something that sort of differentiated the students that knew what was going on versus those who just sort of knew the basics. But yeah, hopefully that's a pretty thorough answer to your question. Min and mean, I believe, work the same way. I would look it up. I know min does for sure. Mean, I'm not positive, so I would look that up in the documentation. You'll see an example. So actually, I can pull up MATLAB. Let me stop my screen share really quick, or switch to share in OneNote. I don't know if I have students stuff up. Anyways, that's one question down. I know I saw some other questions. It looks like Hussein got his question answered. Yeah, so the written portion is going to be all or nothing for the most part. So for example, the questions like find each line and that's incorrect and correct it. Obviously, each line is a separate one. And then even within that, normally we give a point for line number and a point for the correct answer or some breakdown like that. I'm pretty sure it's going to work the same this year. Caitlin can correct me if I'm wrong. Awesome. Michael looked it up for me. Thank you, Michael. Let me make sure that I'm not sharing. And sure enough, I do have my student stuff open. Yeah, now I have MATLAB open for any other questions. Yeah, okay. So, does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to go over, concepts? Doesn't really matter. Open to talking about whatever, so. If not, I can talk briefly about concepts that we think are going to be on the exam, but I don't know how valuable that's going to be because it's not too much. We're not too deep in the semester, so you should have a pretty good idea of what we're covering. Okay, yep, sounds good, Spencer. Anyways, while Spencer's typing up his question, I don't know, the other TAs can interject here if they have anything, but I think in terms of the exam, the biggest thing is, and this is true of all your engineering classes, make sure that you genuinely understand every function. And I don't just mean, oh, this is the function, this is the syntax for it. I also mean, okay, well, what ways can I use this function and understand what type of problems that you can do that use that function. Um, what is CB? All right. Oh yes. Okay, that's good, Tessa, because that that means that this won't be short. I was dreading like coming in and nobody having questions and then having 10 people just sit here listening to me talk. That's God knows I would never put the TAs through something like that. Okay, so I'm gonna do Spencer's question. So let me first write out my variables. So this is another thing. If we give you a question that has the MATLAB syntax, you have to write it out. There's a reason why I'm doing these problems and explaining these problems on OneNote instead of doing it in MATLAB. I could do it in MATLAB, but having it in OneNote allows me to draw out the questions, which honestly makes it easier. So make sure that you're drawing out all these questions, because I mean it makes a world of difference, and you can tell. I mean, when you look through the written portions, it's obvious the students who know what's going on versus those who don't. So we have 1, 4, 3, and then our second row is 2, -3, 2. Okay. Then we have C, I'll just have it on the same row here, is 1, 2, -3, -2. Whoa. This one, -2. Okay. And then we have that CB is equal to C times B, all rows, first column. So another thing that you'll notice when I'm talking through and writing out these problems is I say things like all rows, first column when I'm writing : 1, right? So this is something that if you get into the habit of doing that, it's going to make you just immediately recognize what's going on. So just like in Tessa's problem before, we're going to break this down. So let's start. Obviously, we know what C is again. So the only part we have to break down is this. So all rows, first column, we know that this is going to be 1, 2, right? That's not too hard to get to. So now we have C, which is 1, 2, -3, -2, times this, right? And we say, okay, what's the first thing that we have to check? Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So Spencer answers my question. Yeah. So we have to check if the dimensions don't work. And so you say B2, 3 is -2. So this is a -2. Let me know if that's correction is right. It doesn't actually end up mattering for this question, but yeah. Okay, good. So, because we're only dealing with the first column, right? But, right. So we have to check if the dimensions agree. And so what we mean by that is we say, okay, how many rows do we have? We have 2 rows. How many columns? We have 2 columns. How many rows do I have here? I have 2 rows. How many columns do I have? I have 1 column. So when we do this, if you screw this up, what error do you get? You get an error that says inner matrix dimensions don't agree, or something along those lines, right? So what does that mean? It literally just means that this number here is different from this number here. It's actually that simple. So if you just write it out, again, this is rows, this is columns, this is rows, this is columns. If you just write it out, it's a very, very, very quick check. So why do we get this error? Well, it's because this, we're not using the dot operator, remember. We just have the asterisk. This is matrix multiplication. And so the way that we perform matrix multiplication is we multiply this row by this column, and then we multiply, if I can get a new color, this row by this column. So, right, exactly. Thanks, Michael. Generalized it for me. And so the results of this, and maybe I'll even put it in orange, is, well, we don't quite know, right? So we have a 1, 2, and we multiply it again by 1, 2, and we say, okay, well now I've got 1, 4, but what do I do with that? You actually have to sum it. So you take the resulting vector that you get and you take the sum. So 1 times 1, 2 times 2, sum that, you have 4 plus 1, and you get 5. So our first value is 5. Now, I'm good, okay. And then -3 times 1, -2 times 2. So that's -3 and -4, so that's -7. And that's the result that you should get with MATLAB. Let me know if that's not the case. Yeah, so you have to take the sums. Now, one other interesting thing, if we write out and we say, okay, what are the dimensions here? Our dimensions here are 2 rows, 1 column. That actually comes from here and here. Our outer matrix dimensions match the matrix dimensions of our final matrix. So if at some point that isn't the case for you, you've done something wrong. So just be mindful of that. I don't think we're going to stress this too much, and we're certainly not going to give a very complicated example, but an example like this should probably take, I don't know, no more than 2 minutes. Once you have this, it's really just simple multiplication and addition, and so we're not going to be trying to trip you guys up with anything like that. So, yeah, awesome. So I think Tessa had other questions. If anyone else has questions, though, please do add. But yeah, I'm going to section ourselves off here, and we can move on to the next question. Okay, let's answer Catherine's. So from quiz 2, we have a couple matrices. Find T. Okay. So this is a really good one. I like problems like this, and so it's actually problems like this why I'm sort of a bad coder, because it lets you cheat into some of the things that you commonly have to do. It's always maybe not always the best. Thanks, Michael. Michael is definitely trying to paste that into MATLAB, and so he just pasted it back into the chat like a fool. Yes, he's embarrassed now. Okay, so we have A equals 2, 3, 1. Second row is 5, -2, 2. Third row is 9, 4, -3. So if we take all of these and we say the sum of the sum where A is less than 10. So this, let me make sure I've actually copied this correctly, because the answer, okay, so the correct answer, right, is 9. So how do we get there? So we have to take this apart. So we have T is equal to the sum of A less than 10. So the important thing always is to start at the middle, work our ways out, right? That's what we've done so far in both these last questions. Figure out what our individual parts look like. So what does this look like? Well, here's A. What this is logical is asking is, where is A less than 10? And so in this case, the answer is everywhere, right? These are all going to be 1s. So what you have to understand about this is that we're creating a mask, and the question is asking you, what does that mask kind of look like? How many times is this condition true? Because our sum is only going to take the sum where it's true, because where the condition is false is going to be 0. So the resulting matrix here is just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then we take the sum of that. So our first sum, right? If we still are in our outer sum, but we have taken this first sum, the result will be 3, 3, 3. And so the sum of that is going to be our answer, which is 9, which is T. Not 9, which is 9. Thank you, John. You are truly ahead of your time. So yeah, hopefully that it's a little tricky. So briefly, this is another good question that I think we can try just a slightly different version. And this is another really good way to test yourself, is try slightly different versions of problems that you've gotten and see if you can get the right answer, especially questions you've gotten wrong the first time. So what if I were to say, and I'll make this slightly smaller so we can see, S is equal to let's see here, the sum of, I was thinking of something sneaky earlier, but I think I've forgotten. Yeah, I've definitely forgot. Oh, what was I going to do? I was going to do something with find, but let's not. So let's say the sum of A less than, I don't know, 5, right? So is there any situation where sum would add up the rows instead of the columns? Yeah, so for Hussein, right, sum, the way it works is if you want to specify the dimension, you would say A, comma, and then the dimension. So the dimension is assumed 1 if you don't put anything there. If you want to sum along the rows, you would put in a 2 here. And then later in the semester, we will be dealing with 3-dimensional matrices. And so when we come to that point, you can use 3 to add along each layer. But the important thing to know is that this second location is for the dimensions. Anyways, getting back to this question, we know that we can do this part. We should start with this part though. A less than 5. So the first row is all less than 5. That's 1, 1, 1. The second row is going to be 5. Is 5 less than 5? No. Is -2 less than 5? Yes, and 2 is as well. Is 9? No. Is 4? Yes. Is -3? Yes. And so the sum of this is going to be 7. So the result of this is 7. And so you can try this with any combination. You also might try it without this first sum, because if we get rid of this first sum, it turns into a different problem as well. So all things to try, and yeah. Hopefully that is a thorough explanation. So yeah, ready for the next one. Oh, I got a new message, but I somehow ended up at the top of the chat. Yep. Yeah. So Spencer asked a good question. What actually is the result without the first sum? Without the first sum, I'll write it over here. Without first sum, the result is in fact 1, 3, 3. Okay. I'm hoping. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to admit participants as we're moving through here. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah. Ready for the next question when you guys are. No. So that would exclude. So this is a good question. Tessa asks. So she says that would the conditionals would the line of code x less than 4 and x greater than 4 include 4? And so the result, as Michael points out, is no. And so if we draw our number line, right, and we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we want to highlight where this is true, so I'll make it in green. So we know that this is going to be true where x is less than 4. So we go up all the way right until we almost get to 4. And so we put the little minus here to note that we're on the negative side of 4. And then our other condition is x greater than 4. And so we work our way backwards from positive infinity all the way back. And then we say, oh, we don't quite get there. And we've got positive. And then we say, okay, are we done? We're done. No more conditions. And so we draw a little circle here to note that at 4, it's not included. There's the condition is not met. So yeah, this would not include 4. If you turned either one of these into like a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to, actually that doesn't work for greater than or equal to, right? But if you turn this into greater than or equal to, either those or both would include 4, but since we don't have those, it does not. So that's a good question. Setting a variable to a logical statement. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I don't know, setting might not be, well, I don't think it'd be the word I would use. I would say comparing, just because it's more, I think, like common English kind of thing, that it's just like a more conversational way of saying it. But yeah, I think that's, I think that would be a fair way to say it. Luckily, we don't have, what are those called? Like definition questions on our exam. Oh my God. I have an exam coming up that has a ton of those questions, and I'm ready to not do well. So, okay, let's see. So obviously, if anyone has questions, put them in the chat. If you can't find the chat, just like hover over your screen where you can see my screen, and then hopefully it pops up and you can see where to click for chat. I'm trying to think. There was something I was going to say about the exam, but I'm drawing a blank, so it must not be that important. So that's the debugging practice that you did today in class? Oh, okay. Yeah, so let me, oh gosh, well, let's see. Do you have anything? Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share really quick, just so that I don't run afoul and have students' grades up on Blackboard when I open this. But yeah, let's briefly go over that whole thing, and maybe what we'll do is I'll tell you the line numbers, and you can tell me what's wrong with them. So where was that? That was in lecture material. It might be slightly different for your class. Each class has their own. Midterm 1 review. And then debugging practice. Take this one. Oh God, I have to download it. Oh no. Download. Let me click save. Show in folder. Long click. Open with, and we open it with Microsoft Edge. Okay, good. Now I can reshare my main screen. All right. So I think this is the debugging practice you're talking about. If it's not, well, oh well. This is a good one anyways, so we're going to do it. But yeah, so one thing I'll note immediately here, the fact that I don't have close all here isn't an error. So we're going to ignore that. So we have errors on the following lines. So we have an error on line 7. We have an error on line 9, an error on line 11. And then I have a special note about that. We have an errors on line 13, 15, and 17. And we have an error on 21. And I'm missing one. I said 7. Oh, yes, 10. Thank you. Yep. So you'll notice these are out of order. That is completely fine on the exam. When we grade part ones, especially the first time last semester, it was really bad because you could tell students were like running out of time, erasing and then rewriting answers. So just make sure that you write out everything. It doesn't need to be in the correct line number order. So these are line numbers. What do we have wrong with each? Who wants to answer line 7? I think I've got it up showing for you guys. You guys can see my screen, right? I hope so. Let me see. Am I sharing it? Yeah. Yeah. If anybody knows what's wrong with 7. Yep. So Tessa points it out. We have this here. Are we actually inputting a string? No. So we need to get rid of this. Now, I'm going to do this once, and I'm going to pray that you all are able to emulate it on the exam. This is super important because when we're grading part ones, we see it all the time where this isn't like you don't do this. When we say corrected code, we mean write out the corrected code. We do not mean write a sentence explaining why the code is wrong or write explaining what you would delete. We want the code without an error. So what I would write on the exam is I would write WAVE equals input open, and then what is the measured, and I have to move my chat over really quick. What is the measured wavelength? And obviously some of these lines are kind of long. Then in nanometers, question mark, this, and then I'm done, right? Semicolon. Actually, it doesn't matter if you put a semicolon on an input, but semicolon nonetheless. Actually, it does. I take that back. Fair enough. Yeah, so we've been told to grade ... dots both ways in the past. It sort of depends on the length. I would say I write pretty big, so if I could get it in, I would expect all of you all to be able to make it fit as well. It's not that hard. Just be conscious. If you need to write small, write small. Just make sure that it's really obvious that you've not included, for example, this S. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so does anybody want to answer what's wrong with line 9? Awesome, someone's on top of it. Perfect. Yeah, so we need these here. So I'm not going to actually write all of these in, but well, I'll just write. So then I guess the next one we have is line 11. We can do line 10 as well, though. If anyone has, oh, and I'll explain this while people are writing in their answer for 10 or 11. But so we have errors here and here. Now, the reason we need this or here is because this is basically saying if the wavelength is too small or the wavelength is too big, right? That's what the logical statement is saying. Yep, you need to end the if statement at line 11. Yes, Michael, what is your question? And then if anyone has the answer to 10 or 13, go ahead and post it. Yep, so that's the error on line 10. This needs to be a string. Perfect. So 13 and 15 are what we're looking for next. Yeah, Michael, so that's a good question. So you can assume on this exam that we have done the housekeeping commands. I have a feeling that this is going to be a note on the projector because I know we're going to get this question because we always do. Yes, you can assume that the housekeeping commands are correct. Yeah, so to answer Tessa's question, um, that is how you can tell. Another way to tell, just to sort of, is the context of the question. So you'll notice that, so we have this and this, all of these numbers are within the range of 380 to 750. Obviously, we don't go all the way up to 750. The reason is uh, because essentially we have an else statement here. So I've given away the answer for line 17. This is an else statement. Alternatively, this could also be a else if with a condition where wave is greater than 590. Right. So that's another correct solution. So there can be multiple correct answers to these. Uh, right. Yeah. So another thing that Hussein points out is that if we have and here, no value can meet that condition, right? No value can be less than 380 and greater than 750. So we know something must be wrong. But in terms of what that actually is, it comes from the context of the question. So if you just like initially when I was just reading through this problem, my first like gut instinct was just to flip these, right? So say if the wave is greater than 380 and less than 750, and then it's like, wait a minute, throw an error? I don't want to throw an error if that's true. I want to continue with my code. So I knew that I had to have the or statement there instead. So it's all context of the question. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, let's see. So, can anybody tell me what's wrong with lines 13 and 15? Because that's a sneaky one. So these two, I guess your hint is that the problem they have is the same. Awesome. So yeah, so Spencer's right. 13 and 15 need to be split up into separate statements that have an and. So conditionals don't work like this. As nice as it would be if it worked like this, they just don't. So if 496 is less than or equal to wave and wave is less than or equal to 590, that is correct. But the way it's written right now, MATLAB isn't able to read that syntax. If anything, I think MATLAB might actually read this syntax incorrectly. And like, if this is true, set the value to 1, and then 1's always going to be less than 590. So you might actually run into some really weird behavior there. So yeah, be very cautious about that. Yeah, it gives you a warning that it's wrong. Perfect. And then let's see. So that's 15. We covered 17 already. We have 21, I think, right? 21. Yep, capitalized wave. Easy one, easy spot. Normally we try to do trickier things, but there's always going to be sort of free points built in. So make sure you use your free points. What do you mean on the wrong side? The \n looks good to me. Oh, you can. Wait, do you mean you can use it outside of the apostrophes? If that's what you guys mean, I did not know that. So that's news to me. But yeah. Um, oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. No. Right. I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Um, that's actually, well, let's see here. Yeah, that's good. Um, yeah, good thing to keep in mind. Though I don't think that was the intent of that part, but certainly wouldn't be penalized for doing that, for example. Yeah, and then another thing, as we discovered, so I said I was going to say something about line 11. You could solve this in 7 line changes. So I'll just show that briefly. If we wanted to solve this in 7, we would get rid of this end statement on line 11, and we would turn this into an else if. And so if we turn line 13 into an else if, we know that our else if doesn't contain any values that are tested here, so we're good to go in that regard. And that's a simple way to do it in 7 line changes, although one line change has multiple things sort of changing about it. But yeah. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad we were able to go over that. This is a good example of what you have. The other thing is there's other debugging practice problems. To answer Tessa's original question which was, will there be solutions to these posted online? I've given you a solution to this one. The other ones will not. You can put it into MATLAB until it works. Is going to be your solution, as kind of blunt as that seems. But yeah. So any other questions? There's something, man. It's really bugging me that I can't think of. That's correct. You won't be able to use any files that you have on your computer. So that includes your notes, that includes your MAs. Can't look at any of it. If we see you looking at it, it's a really easy way to get yourself a 0. And then the great thing about this class is if you get caught cheating, what happens is you get a 0 on the assignment, which is either normally an MA, but we've done it on exams as well. So you get a 0 on an exam that's worth 20% of your grade. and then you're dropped a full letter grade. So now, if assuming you got 100% in the rest of the course, you'd end up with a C minus. So don't cheat, as if you needed another warning. But yeah. Let's see. Yes. So to answer Hussein's question, absolutely. So all the MATLAB documentation is offline. So it's like when you download those like 7 gigs of files, a lot of that is the documentation for all of the different functions that you're using. So all the documentation works offline. So you will be able to use it on the typed portion of the exam. Obviously, it won't be available to you on the written portion of the exam because you won't be able to have your computers out. But yes, that's a good question. Make sure that you sort of know how to work with it. The note that Dr. Burleson made in lecture today was, while it's good that you know how to use the documentation, don't be relying on it for every little thing. If you end up relying on it for every little thing, you're going to have a really bad time. It's just going to take you forever to get through the exam, and that's no good. So the other thing is, part of this exam is being able to do it in the amount of time that we've given you. As nice as it would be to not be that way, we give you a huge percentage of your grade in this class is stuff that isn't timed. So it's only fair that we have a good bit of the grid also being stuff that is timed. So other than that, any other questions? We've got another hour. At least that's what I've scheduled in my pocketbook. My Google Calendar, if you will. All right. So, okay. Okay, yeah, so that's a good question. So Hussein's asking, are the 2 hours plenty of time or just enough time for the exam? I would say most of the time it's plenty of time. The written portion, a ton of people finish the written portion early. Uh, sometimes I feel like some of those people are the ones that have like stopped writing answers halfway through. Um, eh, but normally, I mean, there's also a lot of like people who get 100 on the written portion who finish plenty early. 45 minutes is a ton of time. I think that's what you're getting for it. Because of that, I think it's going to be kind of long. It'll probably be the longest written portion of the semester. Um, in terms of the typed portion, this typed portion I believe is only an hour with and then a 15-minute planning period before it. I want to say, I don't know. Other TAs can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But in terms of whether we give enough time, we do. So this isn't, we're not testing speed necessarily. We're testing competency. So we're testing basically, are you in the like 10th percentile of speed? If you're so slow that you can't like actually like physically finish the exam during the time we've allotted, there's other problems. So if if you're assuming you know how to do everything, because really, I mean, some of the exams that get turned in that get hundreds are like maybe like, I mean, even the finals are like less than 100 lines of code. So you don't have to put any comments, right? You don't have to do anything like that, and you won't have to do a ton of fprintf statements. Dr. B already told us that. I don't know if he said it in class. If he didn't, oh goodness, I've given it away. There won't be a ton of fprintf statements. There will be enough to test you on everything. So the instructors for this class are very good. They know how to write exams, unlike a lot of the engineering professors you'll have. So what they're going to do is they're going to test to see if you understand a concept. So say they want to test if you know how to use find. They'll have one part that tests find, and then you'll move on. And then if they want to test that you know max and min, they'll have one part that tests max or min, and then you'll move on. So it's not going to be a bunch of copy paste. We're not trying to get you confused in any ways. The other thing is it's written like the MAs. It is task based. Okay, I got my words out. So since it's task based, it's pretty, I would say, manageable. So yeah, I've never thought, even the exam that students thought was too long last semester, I don't think that's the case. But Dr. B thinks that the students were right and that it was a little too much, and so we scaled it back on the second one, and so we do a pretty good job of timing. Right. Yeah. So that's a great question, actually. So if you can hard code something to make your code work, do that, but also leave the code that doesn't work in your comments. So show the instructor, because the instructor will be reading through your code. So show the instructor that, hey, I tried to use this method of masking. It didn't work out. Let's just pretend that my result was this. This is what the test case is, and then you move on. So yes, if that's what you have to do, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you do leave in your code that didn't work, because you might receive partial credit along the way. Obviously, you haven't gotten an exam rubric back yet, but in the past, the rubrics, once the rubric was 3 or 4 pages, so the point breakdowns are super, super small, just like on the MAs, even smaller than on the MAs, really. And so you never know what you've typed might turn into points. So yeah, what Caitlin says is true. Make an assumption and move on. The other thing is, and I don't recommend this, but if you don't know what assumption to make, you can still move on. Just know that your code might end up getting pretty ugly pretty fast. So I wouldn't recommend that because you won't be able to test it, right? And then finally, most of the tasks, although not so much on the first exam, but on later exams, they're going to be broken up in a way where, as long as you get like the data input, right, the data import, as long as you're able to get that, then you should be able to get through each individual task, even if you screw up one of the tasks. So it's not like a super linear thing. If you were to draw it out, it would be like, okay, so here's my data import. So this is my data import. And then I have my task 1 box here, my task 2 box here. So this is task 1, this is task 2. And the exam would look something like this. And then maybe task 4 and task 5 are together, right? And task 5 is the data output. So it might look something like that. If you've alt-tabbed away, you can look at the screen to see what I just drew. But yeah. Any other questions, either about content or about the exam? Size, mean, max. Yeah, so min along with max, that's kind of obvious. Length, size, yes. Rand and rand I, you need to know string compare and string compare I. you need to, so I'm going to add to this list. We're also going to have things like, so you already have find. In terms of concepts, you'll need to understand masking. You'll need to understand matrix multiplication. You'll need to understand element by element multiplication. If any of these words, by the way, if any of these words are like catch you off guard and you don't know what I'm talking about, please say so and I can explain it. So element by element multiplication, the other TAs can chime in if I'm missing anything. But yeah, element by element multiplication, what else? If statements, obviously, conditionals are huge. Make sure that you understand conditionals. Make sure, okay, sorry, every time this comes up with conditionals, I have to say it. Tilde means not. Okay, I messed that up on a quiz when I had Dr. B back in, God, 2014. Don't get that wrong, please. Let's see what else. Yeah, that about covers it for the concepts. Masking will be important. But yeah, no, string compare I is another function you'll be expected to know. Obviously, you'll know fprintf. Okay, yeah, so Hussein, we'll go over masking then. So obviously you'll know how to use fprintf, input, CSV read, DLM read, XLS read, load, save, what else? XLS write, DLM write, CSV write. Oh, and basic plotting stuff. So with plot. So rand I versus rand. Rand I gives you integers. Rand gives you random numbers. I'm not positive this, but I have a suspicion that rand I just takes the results of rand, multiplies them by 10, and then, or whatever, however high you need to go, and then takes the floor of that. But anyways, yeah, they're very similar. Rand I is just integers. Rand is for decimal place numbers. So if you needed a random number to like between 0 and 1, then you would use rand instead of rand I. Anyways, any other questions on functions? And then I'll go over masking for Hussein. If my OneNote comes up, okay, there it is. Okay, I'm gonna give 5 more seconds. Rot 90, you will not need to know. Diag, I doubt you need to know. I'm a little hesitant on diag. I'm actually not sure. I would doubt you need to know that. Really just know that, hey, you put a vector along the diagonal of a matrix. That's all you would ever need to know about it. Or you get the diagonal of a matrix if you feed it a matrix. I don't even know what rem does. Mod, no. But so the answer to rem is also no. Remainder, yeah, no. It makes sense now, but yeah, no. Unless, I don't know. I don't think we've used that on NMA explicitly. I haven't seen it. So yeah, I would say no. Yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering which ones we're going over. So for what might be my last act, I'm going to go over masking. This is going to be about the, oh God, Caitlin might be able to give an accurate number. I mean, it's probably getting close to 50th time I've taught this, so if my lecture's stale, Caitlin, let me know and I can try to spice it up with like memes or something. So, y'all want to know what masking is. So I think the easiest way to go about this is with examples. And I would encourage you to go back and look. I've done I don't know, I guess 3 videos have sort of covered it. 2 of them are specifically about masking though. So I would go over and review those videos. I'm pretty sure all of them have been sent out in an announcement. Sorry, I'm checking if I have YouTube open on on my other computer really quick. I'm just gonna check. I think that all of our Switch account, all of our videos are public now. So if you just click on any of our videos, you'll be able to see. You can click on our channel, and all of our videos will be there. Yeah, they're all up. So so there's two. Oh, actually, there's 3 videos specifically on masking. So if this doesn't help you, go watch those. And if those don't help you, come to office hours tomorrow. So it's a lot of. I mean, oh god, it's like 30 minutes of masking videos that we have up. But it's because it's a challenging topic. So let's get into it. 2, 3, negative. That's going to be -2, not a -3. And we'll call 4, -6, and 15, right? All right. So I want to find, if I wanted to find the locations in A where A is less than 3, how would I do that? Well, if I wanted those, I would say LOC, my locations, and I would use find of A less than, what did I say? Less than 3, right? So find, right? Not fine. So find. And we know that this works, and if we ran this, we would know that our output would be 1, 3, and I think it's actually column vectors, so forgive me. Oh, sorry, not 1, 3. It's 1, 4, 5. And so the way that I know that is I'm good at counting. I'm a really good counter, despite my best efforts sometimes. 1, this location. 2 is not true. 3 is true. 3 is not true. 3 is not less than 3. -6, true. -2, true. False, right? So the locations of these, so here's our trues. This is location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So that's how I get my 1, 4, 5. And I think this is a column. I'm not sure. You can check if it's a column or not. I'm too old and lazy. So what is find actually doing? If you look up the documentation for find, what it says is it finds the non-zero elements of an array. So that must mean that it finds the locations of non-zero elements. So what that's saying is that, well, at these locations, we don't have zeros. Well, obviously, we don't have zeros at those 3 locations in A, but we certainly don't have zeros in the other 3 locations either. So what's happening? Well, the result of this, if I just put A is less than 3 into my command window, what I would get is I would get 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. So the 1s are logical true, and the 0s are logical false. And so when I'm talking about it, I'm almost always going to say logical true or logical false, because that always brings us back to the fact that we have this logical statement. This thing here is a logical statement, right? We always have to think back to this being a logical statement. Now, when I talk about masks, I often call it a logical mask. And the reason I call it a logical mask is because if we run something like this in our command window, and I encourage you to do this, is if we look and we say, okay, where's MATLAB? If I open up MATLAB and I'm going to type something kind of similar. I don't remember my matrix exactly, but if I type A is equal to, let's say 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, -6, 5, right? Oh, and I've typed semicolons where there should be commas like a fool. I fix those and I get a matrix. If I type A less than 3, I get a 2 by 3 logical array. And so that's why I preface everything I say with logical, because that is what MATLAB is taking it as. So when we look at this, we say, okay, we've got zeros and ones. And so back to our example, we have zeros and ones. And so if we go back to what find does, find takes those locations, or it takes where there are non-zeros, so in this case where there are ones, and finds those locations for us, and then outputs them to a lovely, I believe, column, not sure, vector. So what does this mean for us? Well, what this means is this is actually a logical mask. And when we talk about masking, we're talking about these logical masks. So this is a logical mask. A logical mask very similar to this logical mask, right, that we have here. This is also a logical mask. And so our input finds, our input to find ends up being a mask. In terms of how it's used, I think my other video actually covers that pretty well. So I'm not going to go over it again, just because it's like kind of long-winded. And for anyone else who's here, I mean, if other people really want to know the different ways to use a mask, I can certainly explain it again, but that's going to take like 15 minutes. So I don't particularly want to do that, unless there's demand for it. Yeah, so this, right, so that does fall under masking, but we can certainly do that, because that's one of the things that we want. So if we just wanted those three numbers and nothing else, the way we would get that is we'd say A at A is less than 3, and our result would be those numbers. And again, I don't know if it's a row or column. You'll have to check. So we get 2, -6, -2. And so, kind of interestingly, there is a way to do this with find. The other way to do this would actually be to take A at the locations, right? This LOC being the same one as here, and this provides the same end result. Obviously, this is one line of code. Using this would be 2 lines of code. Another thing, you can assign this to a variable. So obviously, if we go back to MATLAB, this is assigned to the variable ANS. So obviously, you can assign what this is, which is a logical mask. You can assign your logical mask to a variable. So if I did something like A less than 3 is equal to B, then what I could do is, if I wanted to get these values into a variable C, what I would do is C where A is true for B. And so this is going to be the same thing as this. And so that will give us our same result. So there's other things that we can do with masking. We can replace values. We can perform operations only on certain values. Okay, cool. Anything else from any of our participants? Who do we have? Oh, we still have quite a few students. Yeah, so replacing values is one of the things I go over in our videos briefly. So the most simple example of this would be, what if I say, okay, well, where A is less than 3, right? I want those locations to be equal to 3. So the way I would write this is A, where A is less than 3, is equal to 3. And so the result of this, I'm going to have to zoom way out here because I don't know what my original matrix is at this point, would be 3, 3, 3, 4, 3, 15, 4, 3, 15. And you can test this in MATLAB and it'll show the same result. But yeah, I go over it in more detail in my videos. There's also a way, so obviously I assigned a scalar value here. You can also, really what MATLAB is doing, I give a big sigh because the MATLAB explanation isn't super intuitive. You can also assign a vector here and plop it back in, but in reality, almost always the way that vector is defined is with another mask or with the same mask used in a different way. But I actually do go over all of that in the other videos. So I will not, I refuse to go over that again because that actually takes some time and it takes a sort of better example to set up. Um, one other thing, and this is maybe this is what I was leaning towards earlier when I couldn't remember. Um, whenever I'm doing examples or your instructors are doing examples or other TAs are doing examples, a lot of the time you'll find that we do sort of really simple stuff. So like this is a 6-element matrix that I'm teaching you masking with, right? This is exactly the same as if I had an element with a matrix with 6,000 elements, right? And you sort of just have to internalize that and know that that is true and trust it. Because whenever we do examples like this, we're always trying to do sort of the simplest thing we can do to not confuse the question and to still get you your answer. So, yeah. Cool. Anything else? Other questions, comments, concerns? Do you know if we need a student ID? Yes. So, well, okay. Well, there's an asterisk on that. Any form of ID will work. Don't bring a fake, please. I guess that wouldn't have your real name on it anyway, so it wouldn't work. But yeah, like if you like lose your ID the day of or you forget it at home, hopefully you haven't forgotten your driver's license. But yeah, I've had people use a passport before. It was weird, but I mean, what works works. Oh, we've got somebody that wants to come in. Yeah, so any other questions? We've gone over quite a lot, actually. This has been good. I think we're going to do this for all the exams. Yeah, I'm I'm gonna screenshot that, Spencer, so that I can tell Dr. B this wasn't a waste of time. Let's see. Where's my screen? Here's my snipping tool. Come on, come on. Oh, that's right. I have to type it. Oh gosh. Oh gall. Oh gall. I had a. I used to swim, and my one of the people who like drove us to practice, right, always say, "Oh gall," And whenever I see y'all's questions, sometimes I think, oh, gall. Oh, thanks, Caitlin. You're my hero. Yeah, and I am recording, so this will get pushed online in like, I don't know, it's gonna actually take forever probably for this video to render because I moved the screen around a lot. But yeah, once it's good to go, I don't think we'll send out an email, but again, this is why you gotta like, comment, subscribe on our videos, man. But yeah, actually do subscribe and like hit the little notification button, because then you'll get notifications about all the videos I post when I post them, rather than uh, the end of the week when Dr. Burleson sends out the announcement. So, oh. Yeah, but if there's any other questions, let me know. What is the difference between a single and double quotations? Yeah, okay, sorry. I just have to address Hussein's Hussein's comment. I actually am a real YouTuber, Hussein. I don't know. Oh God, I don't know how I can prove this to you. Let me switch my account to my. I think I have over 2 million views now. Let's see. So I'm probably the most famous YouTuber you know. Don't worry about it though. I'm pretty casual about it. Let's see. Creator Studio. Yeah, 2.25 million views. That's pretty good, I think. Although my ad revenue, since the algorithm changed, that's what the YouTubers blame it on, right? The algorithm. Yeah, I got screwed by that or something. I'll click all of your ads. No. Let's see. So, okay, somebody had a real question. Brandon had a real question, so I'm gonna answer Brandon's question now. I will survive, dude. I've been paying all those ad revenue that goes straight into the John Moosemiller Tuition Fund. So let's see here. So Brandon's question was, oh man, this is forever saved on the engineering one. As far as strings are concerned, what is the difference between single and double quotations? Okay, other TAs, I think Caitlin might be the only other TA on still, but she can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna really pray that I'm right. I haven't used string arrays extensively because they're new, so wish me luck. So we've got two kinds of arrays, and the type of array depends on what type of quotation mark you use. So double quotation, so actual quotation marks, right? This is going to create a string array. Now, we have something else with the single quotations, and this is called a character array. But it's super confusing because MATLAB also refers to it as a string. So a character array is a string, and a string array is also obviously a string. So what does this actually entail? So we can have character arrays defined like we can have string arrays defined like any other array, and it's different than when we define a character array. So the best example is to do this yourself in MATLAB, I promise. But what you want to do is you want to have two variables. We'll do A and B. And if I would say double quote, I love MATLAB. So end quote, comma, it rocks. Right? Obviously a completely true and accurate statement. This would give me a 1x2 string array. Now, if I use single quotes and write the same thing, wow, that whole B is one like stroke. Oof. I love MATLAB and comma. Oh, single quote, right? Single quote. It rocks. So I would go ahead and put both of these into your command window, and what you're going to get is this is a 1 row 2 column. So this is a 1 by 2 string array. String array. String array. And this is, let's see, 1 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So however many characters we have, I'll just call it n. And this is a character vector. I think these are actually called character vectors, because I don't think you can have an array. This is what you use when you're trying to not hard code input statements, like menu statements, things like that. If we give you a character vector, that might be one of the things we expect you to do with it. This obviously less useful, which is why we don't teach it. So there's other things that go along with this, and man, I'm struggling whether I want to show you this, but I'll do it because I'm a sucker for getting you guys confused. But if you don't want to be confused, turn away now. If you do this and pretend that I've written everything in here, your result, right, curly braces, right? So this is a cell array that has character vectors in it. If you do this and then use curly brackets, when you define your like variables in a menu statement, it will work the same as A. So it's very confusing. I would say know these two, know A and B, you're good to go. That's what we've taught on the MAs. That's what we've graded towards on the MAs. So that is what you can expect. If you understand cell arrays, more power to you. They're a strong thing to use, but yeah. Num to cell. Probably won't need any of the conversion functions. Just off the top of my head, I don't think so. But yeah, things like, well, actually, is there even a function num to cell? I guess there must be, but I don't know why. You could just put the number in a cell array, right? Num to cell. Is this a thing? I don't. Oh, it is a thing. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm wrong. But yeah, I wouldn't really worry about the conversion functions too much. Yeah. Yeah, that was you might use you might use cell to num or string to num, things like that for your NAE project. But I don't think we've taught any of those explicitly in class, so that's why I would say don't focus on it too much. And I would really doubt that that's on the free response, like the written portion of the exam. So if you do come across and you think, man, I need to convert this data type, you'll have the opportunity to use the documentation to find the right function. Ugh, excuse me, burping up a storm. But yeah, anything else? Sort of filled out the 2 hours pretty well. Cool. So I'll wait. Oh, string compare. Yeah. So the biggest note I have about string compare is that it works with. Oh, thanks, Caitlin. I just got your. Just see the message. The biggest thing to know about string compare is that string compare strcmp. It's strcmp. Just FYI. I know it sounds, but yeah. So string compare and string compare I. The biggest thing is that it works with vectors. I can't stress that enough. If you didn't do your last MA with string compare with vectors, then you did something wrong. Well, okay, not explicitly wrong. You might have gotten full credit, but in my heart, you did something wrong. Like, it hurt me. I actually didn't have any of my students do it, but if I had to grade one like that, it would have hurt me physically, because we shouldn't have just like a ton of if statements that are sort of hard coded, right? So what I mean by this is if we take our A and we have A defined, right? What I can do is I can use strcmp I, right? So we usually use the I. The I just means that it doesn't care about capitalization at any point. So I can use this and say, hey, actually, let me make sure that I'm using the syntax correctly. strcmp I. Yep, and it wants two strings. So one string, I would define with a single, and I would say, I love MATLAB. And you'll notice I'm spelling MATLAB with lowercase here. And in my other one, I would say A, right? Because A is what we have up here. So if I did this, the result would actually be a mask, which we've grown to love so much, that's 1, 0. So yes, it's true here. No, it's false here. So just be sure that you know it works with vectors. Yeah, I'm not kidding about it hurting me physically. God, well, yeah. Sometimes I know, like, I'm empathetic to it. Like, I've been bad at, I'm still not, like, I'm not good at coding by any means, but oof, sometimes the stuff we see, man, hurts. Hurts my eyes, hurts my heart. But yeah, any other questions? Hopefully, I don't know. That's not like, I don't think that's probably what you wanted out of string compare I, but
Also, just don't forget that if you don't have the I on there, it will make that a 0, 0 because
yep.
it won't recognize it.
Right, yeah. So if we had strcmp of the same thing, so I'll just say quotes here, and we're bringing all of this down, then my result, like Caitlin notes, would be 0, 0. And that's because we don't have the I to let it ignore the capitalization. But yeah, anything else? I'll give it like 2 minutes. So give me a heads up before I end the meeting without you guys not having typed a question. But yeah, if there's no other questions, we can head on out. Yeah, so I'll give it 2 minutes. I've got stuff to do. So I'll just try to be quiet. Maybe I'll listen. Let's listen. Oh, wait. Oh, man. Can't listen to music. Don't want the video demonetized. Feels bad, man. Where is my? Yep, no problem. Thank you guys for stopping by. I really do. When I say I appreciate it, I really do. Makes it feel worthwhile. But yeah, looks like everyone's all out of questions, barring Spencer. So, yeah, we'll probably close it on up. All right, cool. Alrighty, I'm gonna stop the recording.